One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Okay, so if you listened to the last episode, we talked about how to name your podcast. And I'm not going to do a whole recap of everything. If you are in the stages of naming your podcast, go check out that episode and then come back to this episode where we're talking about podcast taglines. I will say in that episode, I mentioned that you shouldn't have a super long name for your podcast for many reasons, and you can listen to that in the episode. But one of the main ones is because I want you to use your podcast tagline as the resource to really further explain your podcast or get your point across or get people really excited to listen to what you are creating. So we're going to talk about podcast taglines and how to create yours. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Because if you've been thinking about creating a podcast for a while, well, I'm so glad you found this show. Think of this as the shortcut / time-saving version of searching Google and YouTube for hours and hours trying to figure out the world of podcasting. Trust me, as a busy mama of 3, I get it. You don't have a lot of time to be spent or wasted, I should say, searching the web, trying to find all the right ideas and all the amazing things that are out there, and you just end up overwhelmed. Trust me, I've been there, done that, took home the souvenir. But this podcast is going to help you in practical ways because twice a week we'll be delivering episodes that are going to give you steps to help you create a podcast your audience can't wait to listen to. So let's get right to it, shall we? Have you been wanting to start a podcast? You've been thinking about it. It feels right. You just know this is the next thing that my business needs. Well, I encourage you to sign up for my 5-day podcast bootcamp. This is a thing that you have been looking for. It is a 5-day video series where I walk you through exactly how to start, launch, and market your podcast, and I throw in some more information about planning strategies and being consistent and how you can make the most out of your podcast from day one. So sign up for our 5-day Create Your Podcast Bootcamp at crystalprofit.com/podcast bootcamp. And do it already. You know that you've been wanting to, so just bite the bullet and join us. So the first obvious question is, what is a podcast tagline exactly? So the way I define a podcast tagline is a supportive sentence or a statement that helps convey the purpose of your podcast. And because my brain works really well with numbers and systems and processes, whenever I'm talking about this to my clients and to my students, I suggest that their taglines have a few distinct words that they can use over and over again, like in their emails and their copy whenever they're promoting on social media. So it's like the buzzwords that you want to be known for. So for this podcast, and I'm going to go into the exact tagline for this podcast, but if you can look at my logo and see, the 3 buzzwords are start, launch, and market. I say this all the time. I say it in my YouTube videos. It is on this podcast. Like, these are the buzzwords that I want to use in my podcast tagline. So for your tagline, it could be 2 to 3 things that you do or that your podcast does if it's explaining something, or it could be words that are about how your podcast solves a problem or how your podcast can add value to someone else's life. And this is like my ninja hack, right? This is a pro tip, okay? First pro tip of the day. I just got to be really honest with you. When I was trying to come up with the Profit Podcast tagline, remember, because I rebranded and I really didn't know, like, I knew I wanted to say something different, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted it to be. I just started listening to a ton of other podcasts. I examined what their taglines were. I studied what other people were doing, and I noticed that they were using a short, single sentence to explain what their podcast does. Okay, so that is what a podcast tagline is. And now we're going to talk about, where does it go? And this is one of those that is, it's so subjective, because it's a question that I see. People are like, do I need a tagline? Where does it go? What are you supposed to say? But I think it's just going to be different from podcast to podcast. And it's 100% up to you. You can say it in the beginning of every single episode. You can have it in a pre-recorded clip that you drop into every episode. That is actually what I do for this podcast. I have a main theme that I drop into every single episode. And you can do that, or you could just say it at the end while you're telling people, hey, like, I'm signing off, we're wrapping up. And it's funny because I almost feel like I have 2 taglines, right? Because I have the one where I talk about, entrepreneurs and what I do. And then I have the very end, which is keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. That's kind of like the sub tagline. It's like the, what are those? The subliminal message. Because I'm a motivator at heart. I was a cheerleader. I've been a cheerleader since I was 4. I say I've been. I'm not a cheerleader anymore. But I was a cheerleader starting at the age of 4. And I did it like all the way through high school. I've always been the team captain, like, of when I played volleyball, when I did basketball. So, I mean, I just have a coach mentality and a motivator. So saying keep it up, we all have to start somewhere it's just my way of saying, like, I'm here to encourage you, and I'm here to remind you that we all start somewhere. Like, we all start with 0 podcast listeners. We all start with 0 downloads. We all start with 0 followers on social media. We all start with 0 people on our email list. but we all have to start somewhere. So you can definitely have something else that's like a sub, like, okay, this is my sign off. It's what I say every time. But your tagline is specifically something to do with your podcast. And I'm actually going to share with you some great examples because, like I said, I'm kind of a podcast hoarder. I love to listen to a ton of different kinds of podcasts. So I have I think I have like 7 examples I'm going to share with you today. But I just want to recommend that you have your tagline in every single episode. And there's a reason behind this. And it is all about branding. And you're going to see in a second what I'm talking about when I give you these specific examples of people, y'all, their taglines are just freaking killer. They're awesome. And I want to tell you about them because I actually remembered there was 2 of them that I looked all of the podcast taglines up to make sure I had them correct. But y'all, there was 2 of them. I didn't even have to look them up. I knew what they were because y'all, that is branding. That is marketing at its finest. I've listened to these podcasts for so long that I can repeat to you what their tagline is. It's almost like the mission statement of your podcast. Like, I didn't really want to go out and say your tagline is your mission statement because that's, it's going to be different for everybody. And I don't necessarily want to preach that it needs to be your mission statement, but it can be a version of your mission statement. And it's just so funny because I was like, oh, like this is marketing at its finest. I didn't even really have to look these up, but I'm going to because I wanted to make sure I got the words right. But that's the power of a tagline. And but I want to talk about, so the Profit Podcast. I'm going to share this because I didn't want to clump myself in because I have these other ones titled like examples of great taglines. I'm not clumping mine in there. I'm just telling you what it is and how I came up with it. Okay, that's my disclaimer. I'm not trying to be like braggy, like, oh, I have the best tag. No, I'm not trying to do that. But I am telling you what mine is in case you didn't hear it or in case you fast forward through that because you're such an awesome listener and you show up here every week, twice a week, and you're like, Crystal, I fast forward through that because I hear it every time and I just want the meat of what's going on. Well, I'm going to read it to you today, so you have to hear it. So, the Profit Podcast. Ooh, hang on. I got my radio voice on. Okay. The Profit Podcast, where entrepreneurs go to learn how to start, launch, and market their podcast. Y'all, I'm just the biggest goober ever. I think I just lost a few listeners right there, right? I do not have a broadcasting voice. I understand this. I'm actually a little sore. I'm recording this. Like my voice is almost, this is why I'm recording this because I'm going to be hoarse probably by the time this is over. I did, as of me recording this, I did my speech for Pod Houston last night, which took a lot out of my voice. And I actually just recorded the podcast title. I recorded it right before this, so my voice is kind of going out. So me just doing that, and see, now I'm explaining it, and it's probably gonna make my voice even worse. But yeah, I can't do that low voice. Anyway, so the tagline speaks directly to the audience. Who is my audience? We're entrepreneurs. That's the majority of you. Y'all are entrepreneurs, or you are wantrepreneurs, right? You want to have a business online, or you want to have a business outside of what you're currently doing. So I'm teaching entrepreneurs. They're going to my podcast to learn how to start, launch, and market their podcast. Y'all aren't coming here to learn YouTube. Y'all aren't coming here to learn social media tactics. Y'all are coming here to learn about podcasts. So I make that very clear. If someone stumbles on this podcast and they're like, oh, Crystal, I thought you were teaching crafts, I would say, whoa, no. I mean, I can go bargain hunting at a dollar store and I can make some pretty cool stuff out of Elmer's glue and those like wiggly eyeballs, but that's about where my crafting skills go. I do not claim to be a crafter. So that is not what this podcast is about. And you can self-identify immediately and not be confused that this is about anything other than podcasting. Does that make sense? I feel like
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants. Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
Kind of went in a weird direction when I started talking about crafting, but okay, we're just gonna moving right along. We're gonna talk about examples of great taglines, and I chose podcasts, like I said, that I've been listening to for a long time, some of them many years, but I went and grabbed their taglines. Let me see, how many do I have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, I guessed right. Okay, so we have 7. The first one is The Dave Ramsey Show. I had to list him first because he is the first podcast I ever started listening to. I started listening to him and TED Talks when I worked at my corporate job because I was doing a lot of data entry, and I mean, come on, it's data entry. I got bored and I would listen to this while I'm doing it and, multitasking at its finest. But Dave Ramsey just has such a special place in my heart, and he really knows how to talk to his audience. So his tagline for the Dave Ramsey Show is practical advice for life's tough money questions. And I'm just going to say it again. The Dave Ramsey Show, practical advice for life's tough money questions. So he throws a few keywords in there. So life's tough, like you could use any other word after that and understand that he's connecting with you on you struggling through something, right? You could say life's tough relationship questions, life's tough, parenthood questions, but he's talking about money. Money is his topic. Finance is his topic. But I love that he's saying practical advice. That is what you can expect to get if you listen to the Dave Ramsey Show. He's going to deliver practical advice for life's tough money questions. And I notice he doesn't call out a specific person. There's not a demographic that he says in there. And that's because he speaks to everybody. He really does. And he can do that because he's Dave Ramsey, but that's not where he started. He started smaller. He was talking to a general population of people that he was trying to help, but now he does. He's freaking Dave Ramsey. He talks to people that are newlyweds trying to buy a house. He talks to retirees. He talks to people in the military. He talks to educators. He talks to people running Fortune 500 companies. Like, he talks to everybody, but it's all practical advice for life's tough money questions. Okay, so that's number 1. The second one, staying in the Ramsey family, is Christy Wright's Business Boutique podcast. I listened to Christy Wright for a long time, and I went to the Business Boutique last November, which was amazing. If you ever get a chance to go, if you're a woman and you're in business, then I highly suggest you go to that. But her tagline for her podcast is equipping women to turn their passion into profits. And I'm going to say that again. The Business Boutique podcast, equipping women to turn their passion into profits. So who is she speaking to? She is speaking to women. She's not speaking to men. She is speaking to women. And what is she doing? She's equipping women with knowledge, with resources, with all kinds of tools that they can use to turn their passion, something that they love to do, into profit. And I know Christy's message. Like I said, I've listened to her podcast for a long time, and she's passionate about taking what a woman can do really well, whether it's baking, it's crafting, it's sewing, it's her mom, she owned a cake shop for a long time. It's taking the things that you already love to do, and she's teaching you how to make money doing that. If you have an Etsy shop, Christy is definitely, you need to go listen to her podcast because she definitely speaks to that industry. But that is what she does. She's equipping women to turn their passion into profits. It's very clear what she does. And again, both of these taglines for Dave Ramsey and Christy Wright, they are 7 words. That is a 7-word sentence for Dave's. And then hers is 8. Hers is 8 words. So these are not long sentences. Now I have one. Let me see. I have 2 in here that are a lot longer. So I am going to give you an example of a longer tagline. But the next one is Rachel Hollis's Rise podcast. I've mentioned her a lot because she's kind of a case study. I like to really pay attention because I've seen her podcast when it was the Deus podcast and she rebranded. And I just kind of like to watch what's going on because she's hit the charts a lot of weeks. And it's just really cool to see what she does and how she does it. But her tagline is tangible and tactical tools for your life and business. So I know that her target demographic is women, but she doesn't say that here because she does have guys that listen to her podcast. It's not as many. It's probably 75 to 80% women, but she doesn't call that out here. And I think that that's really important too, is if you do have a specific gender that you're speaking to, then maybe you should call it out. Maybe you should, if you have a podcast for dudes, maybe you say that, like the guys, the manly podcast, I don't know, something like that. But you should call that out. That way, if a woman comes across it and they're like, oh, I would have no desire to listen to this, it's better to have someone not listen than to listen and then leave you a 1-star review because they thought it was going to be about something else, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you don't want it to have a negative reflection on your podcast. You want it to be very clear. And we've talked about this, the clear, I can't ever say that word, specific. Oh yeah. You know what I'm trying to say. I can't say it, y'all. Specific. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not even going to try to say the rest of it because I'm just going to sound stupid. We're just going to keep going. So Rachel Hollis's Rise podcast, her tagline is tangible and tactical tools for your life and business. Okay. So the next one is Amy Porterfield's Online Marketing Made Easy podcast. So her tagline, and this is one of the longer ones, and I actually got this off her website because she does not say her tagline in her podcast anymore. I think that she used to have an intro where it would say it every time, but this is what I grabbed off of her website. So this was almost be like the mission statement for her podcast. But it says expert interviews, mini execution plans, and intimate behind the scenes secrets from my biggest launches, all tied together by my mission to make everything you listen to as actionable and profitable as possible. Now, I listen to her podcast every single week, and I don't think I've ever heard her say this on her podcast. So that's why I wanted to use this as an example, because this is her tagline essentially, but she doesn't say it. And I think it's because she's been around doing a podcast for more than 3 years. So maybe she feels like she doesn't have to say it anymore. Maybe she knows that people that are listening are there for the reasons that are explained right here. So I did want to throw this one in here. I'm going to read it again. So it's an Online Marketing Made Easy podcast. And it says, expert interviews, mini execution plans, and intimate behind the scenes secrets from my biggest launches, all tied together by my mission to make everything you listen to as actionable and profitable as possible. So these are all going to be in the show notes at crystalprofit.com/episode 93. So don't feel like you have to pause it and write everything down. I probably should have said that at the beginning. If you have been writing these down, I'm sorry. Yeah, they're in the show notes. Okay, so let's move right along. The next one is the Jennifer Allwood Show. And Jennifer's, I like this one because she calls out a few different things. So she says, listen in for business strategies and interviews with small business experts to help you build a business and a life that you love. So I'm going to say it again. Listen in for business strategies and interviews with small business experts to help you build a business and a life you love. So she's talking to business experts. She's talking about business strategies. She's having interviews with other small business owners to help you build a business. So not only a business, but also a life that you love. Now, I know I haven't listened to every episode that Jennifer has put out, but I saw her last year at the Business Boutique. That's when I first learned about her, and she's so awesome. She's so full of spunkiness, and you should go follow her on Facebook because she does Facebook Live like a pro. And I actually learned how to do my Facebook Lives better because of her. She has a checklist that's like, okay, here's the things that you can go live about and talk about, and she's such a great influence on me. But I just love that she talks about her business, but also her life. She talks about adoption. She talks about her marriage. She talks about her walk. She is a Christian who openly talks about, her struggles with trying to follow and obey what God's telling her to do and all kinds of stuff. So that is a great example of kind of a mid-length tagline. So I have two more, and these are short, and it's Amy Jo Martin's Why Not Now show. And she does say this in every single episode, and it's part of what she asks all of her guests. And she says, you know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Why not now? And I love it. That's it. And so when she actually says it in the episode, she says, you know that thing that you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? And every single time I think of something different. And it's so cool because it's a really deep connection that I feel like I have with her, and I've never met her in person. We've had a few conversations and DMs on Instagram, but I love it because it draws out that thing you've been thinking about doing. It's just this, I don't forget it. So that's one of the ones that I didn't have to look up. And then the last one is the Brian Buffini show. He is a real estate mogul, real estate expert. He lives in San Diego, and I first learned about him decades ago when my mom sold real estate way before he ever had a podcast. And then I found out he had one, and I don't do real estate, but he talks to some of the coolest people. Him and his wife have 6 kids, and he's just super successful, super down to earth. He's Irish, and he has the best intro music ever. If you like Celtic music, oh my gosh, you have to go listen to his podcast. I love it. But this is the other one because I've listened to it for many years. I didn't have to look this one up. It says The Brian Buffini Show, where we explore the mindsets, motivation, and methodologies of success. And his tagline is actually what helped me think of the 3 things that I wanted to say for my podcast tagline. Because like I said, I study other people's podcasts. So let me read it to you again. It says The Brian Buffini Show, where we explore the mindsets, motivations, and methodologies of success. So he's talking about mindsets, what does it actually take to be successful? He's talking about motivation. How am I going to motivate you to want to be successful? And then the methodologies. How are you actually going to get there? These are all the things they talk. He has had some of the coolest guests. Oh my gosh, other empire creators and other Olympic athletes. He just has super cool people on his show. So like I said, all of these are going to be in the show notes. Go check them out. But I'm going to do a quick recap of everything we covered today with podcast tagline. So we talked about what is a podcast tagline, where does a podcast tagline go, and then I shared with you some examples of what I think are great taglines. So go check out the show notes. Go check these out and use these as an example. If you've been operating your podcast for a while without a tagline, if you've never thought about doing it, why not consider it? Why not consider adding it? Because it's just going to help you create a clearer message for your audience on what you talk about, who you speak to, and how you can add value to your listeners' lives. So that does it for today's episode. So if this is your first time tuning in, I'm so grateful that you're here. I would love for you to subscribe and hear what other fun things we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks. Episode 100 is coming up, and I'm so excited. Be sure to sign up for the 5-day podcast bootcamp if you haven't already. Go check out the other great resources we have in the resource library, and you can find all of that plus everything we talked about here today in the show notes at crystalprofit.com/episode 93. But keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.